Shari kuyay kita likurkani Anchangtam falta kuni.
God Morgen and happy Mani's Day to you. Today we talk about the Norse god Mani, which was represented, of course, to the ancient Norse as the moon. Brother of Sol, of course, the sun. Today I want to talk about the mental control and the balance that Mani really represents within our lives. Before we get started, I do want to give a huge shout out New Reality TV and newrealitytv.com, for they bring a collection of many different perspectives about our spiritual path, maybe providing you with that little piece of intellect that can help you along this journey and actually help you to obtain or maintain your mental space in the modern day hurry up just a blast of mental challenges that we have to get through every day to find happiness and joy on the other side. I also want to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. Thank you so much. We ask, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, please do so. Hit the buttons, do the handshakes, do whatever it takes to help our message get into the algorithms of these providers and actually get distributed to a much further audience to help those to obtain or maintain their mental space. For those of you who just want to hear this in audio, by all means, our audio platforms are available later this morning, and the previous shows are available for you to download and listen to whatever podcast platform you may use. Finally, for those of you who may have a few extra coins, by all means, drop them in the tip jar. We are always looking for more support that we can continue our mission. I do want to also encourage you, if you haven't had a chance, to stop by my website, norsewhispers.com. There you can find a multitude of information about me, my message, my teachings, and certainly those of you who need to maybe bend an ear, you can find out more about my coaching services that are available there. So please visit their website. For those of you who do have a question or comment, by all means, this morning we are live on Facebook. Facebook live chat is available for those of you who want to provide feedback. Today we're talking about control, but before I really get into the mental control that Mani represented, I also want to represent and speak about today, Mani's Day, the dawn of a new week. Remember, we always say, and it's super critical that we understand, that we have a choice. We control our narrative. And so today can either be a drudgery, as many have told me, oh, I got to get up Monday morning, I got to go to work, I got to pay the bills. It's a drudgery. And we kind of set our mind to that. And when we do, we're programming our brain. We're programming our brain to then see the world in a particular fashion. Versus getting up on Monday morning with bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, very much like for those of you who celebrate the Christmas morning, we're up and at 'em. Why? Because we want to race downstairs and open presents and see what gifts are there. So it's very much an anticipation. So in much the same way, we can look at Mondays or Mani's Day in the same way. We can see it as either a drudgery and something to be intimidated by, if you will, or we can see it as an opportunity for growth. You know, I'm always when in different individuals throughout the nation send me things and they say, oh, it's in the mail and here's the tracking number, right? And I'm always excited, right? So I'm watching that tracking number, and I'm seeing where the gift is, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, man, I just can't wait for that to get here. And so I'm kind of setting these things days in advance. So it constantly kind of moving. And so this is the anticipation that I can set my narrative to, right? Or I could be, I got to get up. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. I can be kind of mopey, but I'm setting the energy of the day. I'm setting the energy of the work week, right? Is I'm kind of putting my mind to look for things to support that narrative. Remember, you control the narrative. No one else does. No one else has rights or anything up here unless you give it, right? So when we think about people who may have perceptively, or in our perception anyway, have given us this ill, negative energy, we can carry that baggage, or we can realize that that person whom did that may not even realize that you're carrying this energy. So you're charging them rent in your brain. Well, you're not even charging them, you're giving them free space in your mind, and they've moved on. They've already forgotten it, right? So it's really a control of your narrative, and you have that authority. You have that authority above everyone else. Your authority trumps everyone else. I'm always reminded when we're speaking of authority within the mind, I had a trance once with my great-grandfathers, and in this trance, they explained this concept of the well of the self. The well of the self is a well of water, and at the bottom of this well was this beautiful mosaic of stones, of rocks, of beautiful rocks. And they were constructed in such a way that they complemented each other, and it was a beautiful mosaic. Well, in that, those rocks represent our values, our intrinsic values, what we care about, what really do we care about, right? Equality or just a multitude of things. Love towards our fellow humans, love towards our fellow life forms, harmony with all of those. So whatever our intrinsic values are now, my ancient Norse ancestors would have looked to the nine noble virtues. Things like honor. Honor was above all. Truthfulness, courage, hospitality, industrialness, generosity. All of these things represented core values that made them who they were. They were controlling the bottom of their well, what rocks were in that well. Now, in this trance, as my grandfathers explained, other people in our lives with whom we give a level of authority to can provide rocks to our well. Many times we'll see this in the form of our parents, grandparents, people in authority within our mind. So teachers, maybe, could be a multitude of people, right? As we get a little older, many times we'll begin to issue a level of authority to friends, maybe associates, maybe even people we don't really know, but kind of read about in the newspapers or in the articles or online or wherever. Stars, maybe. We begin to give these people a level of authority. And then when they say something, of course, that's a value that we're going to put into our well, right, wrong, or indifferent. Now, the good news is like your narrative, you have the ability to control what rocks end up in this well, at the bottom of this well. So we can say, hey, that's well and good for you, but it doesn't work in my life. Right? So we kind of deny it. Or if we've already carried this value and we reevaluate it and we go, that rock just doesn't look right. I can get rid of it. I can take it out of my well and I can toss it off to the side, right? It's very, this is controlling your internal narrative, is that we're deciding what values we have. What we have. Now, in my personal case, I remember living my whole life and then, or living a fairly long life anyway, before discovering, of course, my ancestors, of course, being Irish Danes, they brought, as I connected more and more with them, they brought more of these values into my life, honor being primary, first and foremost. And so I brought that rock, and I kept that rock. And so I began to take on more courage, more truthfulness, more industrialness, more hospitality. I'm beginning to find these 9 noble virtues I'm bringing into my well, so that as I experience this reality, I'm actually applying these values to my experience. And so my experience may be different. My experience will be different than even my own experience was several years ago, because I'm changing these rocks. I'm managing what's in my well, right? And you too can control that narrative. You can decide what values you have, what values are truly your own. Now remember, many times these values are going to be given to us from other people, right? From our ancestors, from our parents, from our authority figures in our lives, whoever that may be. And we have to evaluate each of those values on certainly the other values within the rock, but if that's what feels right. Many times people around us will attempt to throw rocks in our well. They will try to influence us with their values, right? And kind of establishing bars, or these levels at which we have to live up to, that may or may not fit our process, our trajectory, right? It may be very different, and that's part of what this life is about, is managing those values, managing those rocks as they come in. All right, super important that we recognize that we control the narrative. We're in charge, right? Not anyone else, certainly not these authority figures with whom we've issued. We have to remember that it's a token, and sure, they may have one value that we're interested in, and then some of their other values we're not, and we can say, I don't want those other ones, but I do want this one. I do represent, or I do recognize this value, this virtue, as being something that kind of fits with my internal narrative, or the internal narrative that I want to have, right? That I want to feel. Okay? So we're in charge of this. And this was represented by Mani. Now, many of you who may have heard the shows before, you understand that when Sol rises in the east, and she rises to her apex there, she's providing light and warmth. This is energy. This is intellect. This is enlightening us along some form or some trajectory, some path forward. And then as she slips past the azimuth there and starts kind of lowering herself into Mani's time to rise, of course, where questions are appearing in our mind. We're beginning to kind of dissect this information that we've received during the day, and we're kind of building this this inquisitive part of our existence, is that we're learning, we're learning to want to know more, right? So we're getting this information, we're figuring out how this fits in the narrative, and then we're saying, okay, so if this is this way, how does this information I've received, how does that relate to this information over here? And we're beginning to drive those questions. And these are the questions that we're going to really create as we get into the cycle of Mani. Then ultimately Mani will reach his zenith, and then we're going to start this kind of gradual curve back up. Why? Because now even before Soul reaches into the sky and begins her climb, we're beginning to receive kind of answers. We're not really into new information yet, right? We haven't really made it into the illumination of the day, but we're beginning to put pieces together, right? So we're making relationships between the knowledge stacks within our mind, and we're beginning to put this all together as to how these parts interrelate with each other and interact with each other. This is the progress as we build into Soul rising in the sky again to provide us with illumination. But we control this narrative. Now, some people say, oh, well, yeah, whatever. Meh. I think the word on the internet is meh. And this is a very sad state, because what it technically means is that we're not feeling anything. We're simply existing, right? We're just, yeah, okay, whatever, right? That's what it means. And so a very, very large part of our existence, and the reason for our existence, is this idea of emotional interpretation. I've said before, and you'll hear it again, when we experience our reality, when we are out doing things and our reality is just interfacing with all of our sensory input, we are experiencing this reality through a filtered lens. Okay, we do not see it in its raw form. We see it through an emotional state. Now, meh, you may say, well, doesn't that mean that we're removing all emotion? No. We have an emotional state that we're still looking through to experience our reality. Whether we choose to acknowledge it or not, absolutely irrelevant, really. All right. What's relevant is that we do have an emotional state. We are looking, in this case, through it to experience this reality, this whatever event is going on in front of us, or that we hear, that we smell, that we taste, that we touch. All of this sensory input comes through our emotional states, which is just behind our physical sensory input. As this process moves through and goes through our sensory input into the brain for processing, one of the first steps after the emotional filter is that the emotional filter is going to drop that energy down to our heart, where our heart will release hormones into the bloodstream. These hormones are going to kind of go everywhere, ultimately ending up in the brain. The brain then recognizes it, looks at what just got provided, what chemical composition is coming back into the brain, and it's going to look this up in its little recipe book, and it's going to figure out what we're supposed to be feeling. At that point, we're just going to do our thing, right? We're going to move forward. But one of the first things that's going to happen after that is that I'm going to go back and reset my emotional filter. This is why if we experience our lives and something offends us or something shocks us, we'll say, moments later, we now look at the same, maybe the event still occurring, but we're in a different present now, right? So we're in a different present and we're looking at the same, essentially the same event. It doesn't have the same effect. It's changing, right? Well, it's not changing. Your emotional state is changing, thereby converting what you see or hear or smell or taste or touch of reality. So it's changing the way your brain perceives reality. Okay? This is a constant process. So you will always see reality, interpret the experience of reality, excuse me, based on an emotional state. This is just the way your brain, our brains work, our physical brains work. They're all based on emotion. This is why essentially we have a physical lifetime, a physical existence, is to learn how to manage and modify and make and manufacture emotional states, right? So ultimately, one day, when we leave our physical form, we ascend to the spiritual realm, we can now advise our descendants and our ancestors, for that matter, on how to create a certain emotion. Why? Because now we have the experience of that. So, Mani teaches us a lot about our mental process. Now, you may say, well, the moon doesn't teach you. Yeah, the moon teaches us a substantial amount, and this is why Mani is so important in our existence, particularly today, Mani's Day. As we begin a new work week, we get to decide what we're feeling. We get to decide what we want to do, where we're going, what our trajectory is, what we want to learn, what we want to know. All of those things we get to choose. We get to make that decision. And so we get to decide what our emotional state is. Now, many times what's going to happen is this emotional process is going to go through, as I mentioned, it's going to bring these chemicals back to the brain. The brain's going to recognize that as the emotion. The emotion will be then connected to that experience as it moves towards our memories. Now, there's one more stop in between arrival of the emotion and the memories. There's another stop, and that stop I call the me gate. And this is the gate at which we see, from a scientific perspective, we see generational hate or generational anger and frustration. We can see that cycle broken. And what I mean by that is that when our energy comes up and says, you need to be angry, and we say in our minds, we can decide, again, going back to writing our own narrative, we can decide, no, I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to be aggressive or even violent. I choose harmony. I choose peace, right? And I have this gate that I can do this with. And that's a very important gate in the whole thought process. Because that gate, when I set that to love, peace, joy, harmony, good things, all the good things we want in our lives, it does alter now all this energy that we're storing as an experience before it gets to our memories, and it's going to send a signal back forward to our emotional filters that says, nope, don't look at this as an angry situation. Look at this in a joyful or a relaxed or a comfortable, right? And this is where we are really telling our minds to deny angry energy. We're denying that. We're setting the narrative, and we can do that each and every present. You have to remember the present, all of our consciousness fits into the present. And that present is a micro sliver of time that exists between experiences that we have had and the ones we haven't. It's a micro sliver of time where we're just changing the value of an event. We're saying we haven't experienced this event yet. Oh, we have experienced. That micro sliver of time that exists between those two states. That's the present. And our whole consciousness, for what it is, exists within that present. So think about your life that way. Think about your life as in experiences I have had that I'm learning from, my lessons in life, and the ones I haven't, right? And so those are super clear to understand where we fit in our timeline. We control the narratives. Now, many memories you may have in your everyday life, you may remember them in one state. You may say, oh, that's a very sad memory. All the things about that place maybe bring me sad memories until you go there. And then you go, it's not so bad. I don't know why I do recognize that I was sad while I was here, so that way I remember this place in a sad way. But the memory itself isn't sad. And you can correct those memories by manipulating that energy, as we just mentioned. Very much like if you ever visit your elementary school when you're all grown up, and you go back to your elementary school and you go, everything's a lot smaller than I remember it. Right? It's kind of the same idea. Okay? So we're reviewing these memories to allow us to now provide some level of balance, some level of ensuring that the values and that the emotional states represent our intrinsic narrative, our values, not someone else's, not because it's hip, not because it's cool, but our values, our intrinsic narrative. And that, my friends, is so critical that we adopt. All right. So today, Monday's Day, I would encourage you to set your narrative the way you want to live. You want to be happy. You want to be harmonious. You want to be joyful. Find beauty in the world. And it's out there. It's out there in droves. It's out there just burying us if we look for it. All right. So set your narrative the way you want to be. If you want to be happy, then you get to drive. You get to be in charge. You get to control your mind, how you see things, how you interpret this reality at which you live. You get to make that decision. No one else. No one else. They can tell you how to feel, but you have to remember, you control the narrative. They can tell you all day long, right? You don't have to go there. You can live your own narrative. You can write your own path forward. So remember this when you're feeling, overwhelmed, you're feeling pressured, you're feeling that push by other people's and other situations. Remember, you get to control the narrative. All right. So set your mind and enjoy a wonderful Monday's Day, and we will see you again tomorrow, when we will talk about the courage of the God Tyr. Wonderful God with whom I have a special relationship with, and I very much love. So I definitely will bring him to the forefront. In the meantime, if you have any questions, by all means, stop by my website, NorseWhispers.com. Scroll all the way to the bottom, look to the left. You see a big orange button that says Ask Me a Question. By all means, throw me your questions. Let's talk about it. Let's get dialogue open, and let's figure out how you can establish your own narrative to live your life the way you want to live. All right? All right, my friends. Enjoy the rest of Monday's Day, and we will see you tomorrow morning for Tyr's Day. Love and light, my friends.